Now, you would expect the Smithsonian not to have something that would harm young, impressionable minds. You would expect when you take your kids to a Smithsonian museum, they'd come out smarter than they were from when they went in. They'd be smarter coming out, not dumber. And who's the gatekeeper? Who allowed this to happen? I'm about to go through something that was on their website, and I think the pamphlet was available in the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which just, it's division, it's ignorant, and it's so blatantly horrible. How is this allowed to happen? Now, since news got out of this and there was so much backlash and how ridiculous this is, that they took it down, but they're still spreading ignorance. They're still promoting Robin DiAngelo. They're still quoting her and showing her videos. I mean, here's an idea. African American Museum, maybe instead of showcasing and promoting stupid white people, maybe you should showcase intelligent black people. Just a suggestion. But let's go through this thing. So you might have seen other commentators going through this. I think I'm going to bring new, different perspectives that you haven't heard from other people. And as we go through these things, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First off, if you read something, think, is this just Western culture? For example, think about Japan, China, India, Eastern culture. Would these same things apply? And if they would, then obviously it's not a Western culture thing. It's just a global culture thing. And I'm also going to talk about an influence that isn't mentioned here, which is the influence of ancient Egypt. Obviously, Egypt in Africa, African influence that's really great in Western society. The ancient Greeks were heavily influenced by the ancient Egyptians. Affluent Greeks sent their kids to be educated in Egypt. For the Olympics, when the Greeks wanted to know what was the best way to try and fairly have these Olympic Games judged, they went to Egypt. And so when you watch the Olympics today and you see the different judges giving their scores and different judges from different countries, that whole structure came out of Egypt. Egypt, the first recorded treaty, obviously the building of the pyramids, the power of central government. So there's a lot of ancient Egyptian influence in Western culture. And when you think about Greece, they call Greece white, but really Greece is Mediterranean. It's really not white and it's really not black. It's in the middle. Greece is much closer to Africa than it is to Sweden or even England. So, and we call people of Greece white, but we call Spain people of color. Well, they're on the same latitude with the same skin tone, being about the same distance from the equator. So that's, it's something else to consider. But let's go ahead and get started here. Now, you're going to hear white dominant culture. You're going to hear white people. You're going to hear whiteness. And these are bad things. So the connotation here is white people, whiteness is bad. And the message here is whiteness is bad, Western civilization is white, therefore Western civilization is bad. And I've come to the conclusion, I've seen a few others too, this was not written by somebody that's black. This was written by a white Marxist. We have white Marxists taking advantage of black anger and trying to use that to divide and destroy this country. That's definitely what's going on. But you take your own opinion on it when we go through this. So white dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways white people and their traditions, attitudes, and way of life have been normalized over time and are considered standard practices in the United States. And since white people still hold most of the institutional power in America, so these things are happening not because they're good, not because this philosophy is good, but because whites hold power. That's where this whiteness, and they're going to go through all these examples, comes from. We have all internalized some aspect of white culture, including people of color And that's a bad thing. We need to get the whiteness out. We need to recognize aspects of culture that are white, and we need to purge ourselves. That's basically the message here. Now, it begins with rugged individualism and some of this stuff. So I'm certain, don't know for sure. It would be interesting to see who the authors were, but it's pretty obvious to me. Whoever it is white, and they must be older too, because you're going to see some things in here that are pretty dated. Like rugged individualism, I think of Westerns in the 50s and 60s, where you had that promotion of rugged individualism that pushed the frontier people um, against the wilderness and lawlessness, that sort of thing. Not so much today in today's culture, but also I want to talk about individualism. Individualism is emphasis of the worth of the individual. Individualism is a political philosophy. And our country certainly has individualism as a foundation. When you look at the Declaration of Independence, all people are created equal, deserving of rights, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Constitution that begins with we the people, not we the white people, we the black people, we the rich people, we the poor people, we the people. So these things recognize the value of the individual. Now, some people will say, well, people weren't equal back then. But this is something people have to understand. The founding fathers created something greater than themselves, something that they themselves couldn't achieve, but future generations could strive for. That's something that was recognized by Martin Luther King. This is the standard that we need to meet. But apparently, rugged individualism is a white thing. They talk about the family structure, and a lot of this is comical. The nuclear family, mother, father, 2.3 children is the ideal social unit. Well, 2.3 children is actually modern. Now that we have modern medicine and a much lower mortality rate, children for family used to be an enormous amount because so many children would die, so many people would die. The average lifespan was like 39 years old. So this is not something that's been the same throughout history or is any kind of white standard. This is just like a current statistic. And you'll see a lot of this stuff. They're just basically pulling out of their ass stuff to throw on there and call whiteness. And that's an example. Husband is breadwinner and head of household. That's once again, that's old fashioned, really not how it is today in this society. Same thing with wife is homemaker and subordinate to the husband. And how is that just Western culture? So when you think about other cultures, is that not the case? Children should have own rooms, be independent. Well, that completely depends on how many children you have and how many rooms you have in your house. Don't know how that's a white thing. And then this is just bizarre. Emphasis on the scientific method. Well, the scientific method, when you have a bunch of ideas, is a way to determine what idea is true and what idea is false. And so you have experiments. And if something fails experimentation, then it's wrong. So objective, rational, linear thinking is white. Well, if the idea is for people who aren't white to purge themselves of whiteness, does that mean they're supposed to be biased, irrational, parallel thinkers? What is the objective of this garbage? You got to think about that. Cause and effect relationships. That's a white thing. So somebody who isn't white, wouldn't they just be by having over half a brain realize if I fall from a long distance, I'm going to die. If I walk into traffic without looking, I might get hit by a car. If I study really hard for a test, chances are I'll do better at getting a good grade. Cause and effect relationships, that's a white thing. Quantitative emphasis. Okay, then we get into history based on Northern European immigrants' experience in the United States. Well, in history, if you study history, you have primary sources of history. Ideally, people that were there, writings, letters, if there's newspapers during the time, getting newspaper stories, eyewitness accounts as to what happened and what historical events were going to be. But yes, there will be bias in history from the victors. A heavy focus on the British Empire. Well, the United States of America, the founding fathers waged war against Britain. The primacy of Western Greek, Roman, and Judeo-Christian tradition. Well, the United States Our Constitution was not built on the Bible. The First Amendment is direct contradiction to the First Commandment. But heavy Greek influence, absolutely, with philosophers, with social contract theory. The Greeks, the first democracy in Athens, ancient Romans with the first republic. But once again, ancient Greeks heavily influenced by the ancient Egyptians. And the ancient Egyptians, many contributions to Western society, including writing, including paper, ink, and many things. And we'll go more into that a little bit later. Okay, Protestant work ethic, hard work is the key to success. Think about Asian culture and Asian kids in our school system and how much family pressure there is for them to get straight A's. And so Asian, we're talking about Eastern culture. So how is hard work just a Western culture thing? And Protestant is a sect of Christianity. Okay, Christianity coming from the New Testament, written around 30 to 80 AD. Well, 2,500 years before that, the ancient Egyptians built the Great Pyramids, and they didn't know about hard work. That's a white thing. So that's just something that's stupid. Yes, there is a Protestant work ethic, but it's hardly a white thing, and it was hardly invented by the Protestants. If you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. Well, I mean, that really depends. But what about all the times you do meet your goals because you did work hard? Going to the next, religion. Christianity is the norm. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. No tolerance for deviation from single God concept. This is really insulting to read this as an atheist in the United States of America. Of course, we are a nation of a First Amendment freedom of religion. Our founding father, Thomas Jefferson, said, whether somebody has no gods or 20 gods, it neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg. We are a country of religious intolerance. We have a lot of religions that are here: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and people can be free to be what they want. I'm an outspoken atheist in this country. Nobody cares. Outspoken atheist in Bangladesh, they get butchered. There are many intolerant countries on this world towards atheists or people of any other religion. There's Islamic countries where if you're not a Muslim, you actually have to pay an additional tax and deep oppression for anybody who's an atheist. If you're an atheist, you better not let people know that you're an atheist. So intolerance in this world right now is not, religious intolerance is not happening in the United States of America. We have tolerance. That's what our country was built on. So that is absolute nonsense. When you look at most Christian countries today, they have tolerance of religion. Status, power, and authority. Wealth is worth. So, okay, so that's just a Western culture thing. That's not happening in Japan, China, India. Your job is who you are. Respect authority. Well, actually, that brought up Greece, arguably the most important Western culture philosopher is Socrates, who challenged authority. He challenged the wisdom of people in authority. Somebody was the authority of justice, and I'd say, okay, well, what is the definition of justice? And this authority couldn't even define what justice meant. And Socrates would make these people look foolish. Scientific method challenges authority. Somebody who just says, oh, I'm an expert and this is what's true. Well, that fails experiment, so actually it's not true. But at a certain aspect, you do need to respect. You need to respect teachers in order to learn. And obviously, that's not something that's just Western culture specific. Heavy value on ownership of goods, space, property. Okay, and how is that different here than really anywhere else? And that's really a nature thing, a survival thing. We want places to live where we can feel safe. We want food on the table. Future orientation, plan for the future. So that's a white thing, planning for the future. Nobody else does that, just white people. Delayed gratification, progress is always best. Tomorrow will be better. Well, that kind of gets into the plan of the future thing, right? If you plan well for the future, well, then the idea is that tomorrow will be better. Time, following rigid time schedules. Well, if you work in a group of people and you have coworkers and you have to do things together and you have to say, okay, we're going to start at 9 a.m., then pretty much everybody needs to be there at 9 a.m. so you can work and get your objectives done. So, and how is this just a Western culture thing? Time viewed as a commodity. Well, it is a commodity. You set your goals, what you want to do. There's only so many hours in a day when you want to get these things done. Time is important. Aesthetics. Based on European culture, okay, steak and potatoes, bland is best. Now, when you look at the United States of America, who has more diversity as far as food, as far as restaurants, as far as ethnicity and food and culture? Now, first off, whoever wrote this apparently has never had a good steak. And when you think of potatoes, well, French fries are potatoes. And to steal some material from the comedian Jim Gaffigan, when you were a kid growing up, did your mother ever cook something as good as McDonald's French fry? I don't think so. So this is just stupid. And going through this, you do kind of lose a few brain cells. Woman's beauty based on Blondie, thin Barbie. So once again, that's dated. I would say beauty today is far more based on the Kardashians than it is on Barbie. Men's attractiveness based on economic status, power, intellect. That depends on the women. There are women attracted to that. There are women that aren't. But for women and for men too, choosing the person you want to be with, maybe get married, maybe have a family, that's a very important decision. A woman who chooses a loser, that a lot of women do, wind up harming their lives greatly, possibly even ruining their lives by making that horrible choice. So for a woman choosing who they want to mate with and have a relationship with and maybe build a family with, well, you do want to pick a winner. So have some standards. That's a good thing. All right, holidays based on Christian religions. All right, let's go through the holidays and see how many are based on Christianity. First one, New Year's. First day of the first month of the calendar year. Where did our calendar come from? Our calendar came from ancient Egypt. They had 12 months, 30 days a month. They had 24 hours separated into first 12 hours, second 12 hours, what we call AM, PM. Egypt, African. Our calendar, the origin is African. New Year's, first day of the calendar year. What's the next one? President's Day. Used to be Washington's Day, but we're just going to throw all the presidents in, including President Obama. President's Day, Martin Luther King Day. We have Memorial Day, where we have a day to celebrate the people of the armed forces, veterans, people have died, the great soldiers of World War II that drove the Nazis out of Africa and Europe. It's a day for them. We have 4th of July, Independence Day. The Founding Fathers waged war against England, the greatest military force at that time. An 8-year war with England. People that were just as white. The Founding Fathers were responsible for a whole lot of white people dying. They risked their own lives by engaging into this war, going to war against the greatest military force in the world for independence and freedom. And then we have Labor Day. I'm not too familiar with the origins. We have Columbus Day, which I'm not a Columbus fan. I don't think that's a day we should have. We have Thanksgiving, and that's more into the Mayflower expedition. John Smith, who I believe our country started with the Mayflower expedition, not Columbus. We started with English settlers, not an Italian settler working for Spain, but that's a different video and a different debate. But anyway, we have Columbus Day. We have Thanksgiving, more of the Mayflower. Okay, and then we have Christmas. So one day, right? But Christianity, this celebration of Christmas, that's not biblical. This isn't the day that Jesus is actually said to have been born. This comes from celebrations that are already taken place during that time, really the celebration of the winter solstice. the days are going to start getting longer. That's something to celebrate. And before Christianity, it was Saturnalia. It had these different names. The Romans adopted Christianity, and so, okay, well, we're just going to call this Christian now. But it was a celebration that was already taking place for thousands of years. You look at all the pagan traditions that we have in Christmas, all the paganism rituals. The tree is pagan. Presents are pagan. The lights. You look at Americanized Christmas. Fat Santa is completely American. When you look at the stories of St. Nicholas, he wasn't fat, and you won't see anything, obviously, about Santa Claus in the Bible. So this is a Americanized, a lot of pagan things, nothing to do with any time that Jesus actually was said to have been born. He was born in the spring, not winter. This is something that, once again, taking place at a time that was celebrated anyway and celebrated for thousands of years before Christianity was a religion. So that's what they mean by holidays based on Christian religion. One day that has pagan origins and pagan and Americanized rituals. Based on history, holidays based on white history and male leaders, well, we kind of went through them, and there's a lot of ones that aren't. Justice based on English common law, well, what specifically? We have the Socratic method of cross-examination combined with the scientific method of empirical evidence to determine if people are guilty or not. But when you talk about the crimes, where is stealing things legal? Is that legal in Eastern culture? Where is it not a crime to murder somebody? Is that acceptable in Eastern culture? Now we're going to get into some bizarre things. Competition be number one. Well, if you're in a marathon, if you're in a race, or if you're doing any kind of physical competition, the idea is you wouldn't be out to be last. All right, you don't want to be in a marathon looking over your shoulder and there's nobody there, and you're thinking, man, I busted my ass and trained, and if I didn't train at all, I would have finished last. So with competition, the idea is it makes us achieve a higher level of achievement, a greater level of performance. That's what competition does. And when you see the greatest athletes, well, they're out to be number one. They ain't out to be number two. They ain't out to be last. They're in there to win, and that motivates them and takes them to a higher level of training, of discipline, of achievements in these sports. Win at all costs, I don't agree with that. Winner loser, well, I mean, that's just life. Action orientation, whatever that means. Master and control nature. What? I mean, some of this stuff, once again, it's like, well, I'm just going to pull something out of my ass and throw it on here under competition. I mean, that's how a lot of this stuff is. Doesn't make any sense. Must always do something about a situation as opposed to must always do nothing about a situation. Aggressiveness and extroversion, well, people getting aggressive to get themselves psyched up to, do well, but that's not all athletes. Some are calm, cool, and collected. Decision making, I really love that one. Decision making, that's white. So if you're not white and you're making decisions, you are appropriating white culture, and you should stop that immediately. What is the purpose of this? Majority rules when whites have power. Well, that's not true. If whites have 60% of the population and you have candidate A and candidate B, and 55% of the white people vote for candidate A, only 45% of the white people vote for candidate B, but 40% of the minorities, 90% vote for candidate B. Candidate B wins, even though most white people didn't vote. So whoever put this together apparently doesn't know what a majority is. Well, when you look at the founding of this country, the founding fathers warned about the tyranny of the majority. And we're not a democracy, we're a republic. We vote for people that are then supposed to represent us. And of course, there's corruption and issues there. We won't get into any detail. But we also have, this is why the country was constructed the way it was, why we have the Supreme Court that has their power, Congress and Senate that have their power, presidency that has their power, checks and balances to stop a dictator from creating total power. The founding fathers could have created a monarchy. just like they came from, but they didn't. They built something to try to prevent a monarchy, a king, a tyrant from taking total power. And that's why the country is developed and organized and structured the way it is with the balance of power. And when you look at the Electoral College, that is something where you can't just focus on populated cities. You got to focus on rural areas if you want to win an election, to give those people a say-so as well. When you look at 2 senates per state, no matter if how populated the state is or unpopulated, you still get 2 senators. So you have some balance, but then Congress people do depend on the population. So you're going to have more Congress people if your state has a high population. So a lot of thought and work has been put into this. There's a lot of influences, including 6 Nations of the Archives. So we even have Native American influence in the structure of our country, where we looked at some of their structure and incorporated into ours, as well as philosophy, Greek influence, or once again, influenced by the ancient Egyptians, Roman influence. There's a lot that went into this country. And the people that want to tear it apart, what are they going to replace it with? Did you see what happened in Chaz? The police-free zone in Seattle? What a disaster that is. That's what would happen if we tore down what we'd have now and let these idiots that don't have a clue about anything take control. But we're almost done. Communication, the King's English rules. Well, when you look at Western civilization, I'm pretty sure that France is part of that. They don't speak English. Germany, they don't speak English. Talked about the influence from Greek and Italy, Rome. Well, they didn't speak English and Greek, don't now. Italy has their language. So different languages, and every language has their rule as far as punctuation and the proper saying of terms. And in Spanish, you have different words for family members, depending on if they're on the father's side and the mother's side, and female versions of words, male versions of words. So every language has its rules. Written tradition. Okay, written tradition is white. Well, when you look at ancient Egypt, paper, ink, writing, that is African origins. And so were the ancient Egyptians doing that to be white? So the history lineage of pharaohs, the military expeditions, the writings that we have in Egyptian hieroglyphs. At the time, rather than pulling out their iPhone and recording it and having interviews, they wrote stuff down because of whiteness. It was very important them to be white. When Plato wrote about Socrates 2,400 years ago, he wrote things down to be white. Otherwise, he would have got his camcorder and had a video. What the hell do you mean written tradition is a white thing? How stupid is that? Avoiding conflicts, intimacy, don't show emotions. And once again, they're just pulling stuff out of their ass and throwing it on here. Don't discuss personal life. And this one's good. Be polite. So being polite is a white thing. If you want to purge yourself from whiteness, then be an asshole. I guess that's the message here. But wow, you would think an African American museum would honor black people rather than insult them. And what a bunch of garbage. And how did this get through? And it's been taken down, but they're still promoting that idiot Robin DiAngelo, who's ignorant about race, who's a racist, who doesn't have any black friends. And to make herself feel better, she just projected herself on all white people and wrote this book called White Fragility, and basically said, all white people are ignorant of race, are racist, and don't have any black friends. And obviously, she's just speaking for herself. She's not speaking for all white people. But that's the kind of garbage they're promoting. And once again, African American Museum, rather than promoting stupid white people, why don't you promote intelligent black people? Just a thought. Anyway, thanks for listening to my rant. This is Jim Wall. Until next time.
Cisco, do we have to leave all our good friends now? Only until next time, Pancho. Adios, amigos.